So the given name, which country they're from, the birthday, these are the basic documents. Sometimes, this is another trick, immigration will write additional annotations here on the back of the form when the guy enters, or girl, or whatever. You'll forgive me, I say guy for everything, you know. Are we politically correct here? You know what that means? Are we okay? Can I just say what I say? So anyway, they may write something like, not valid for change of status on the back. Not valid for, you know, student status, or, you know, whatever. So they may add some additional notes here about what can be done with this I-94. No extension, you know, things like that. Rude things, usually. It's not a good thing to have notes on the back there. So when you ask your employees for copies of the I-94, it's a good idea to ask for front and back. And that way you know 95% of the, 99% of the time there's not going to be anything back there. It's going to look just like this, blank. But sometimes you may be surprised there's a little note back there, and that could make a difference. Okay. I'm ready for the next slide. All right, go ahead. Yeah, staple here. See that? They just staple that thing in your passport, leaving holes in your passport. How do you like that? It's kind of rude, huh? All right, so there's a portion that the immigration officials will keep, and then they give you the other portion, staple it in the passport. Okay? So when your employee leaves the United States, what do they do with that piece of paper? Do they crumple it up and throw it in the garbage? No. What do? They give it back to the immigration guys at the airport. Even I'm going to give my little paper back to the immigration guy when I leave here. They're going to say, hey, he left before the day that he was supposed to. Good boy.
But I believe there's no immigration while checking out of the country. They have to just drop it that in the box.
Yes, mostly they're not really checking. Supposedly there's a database somewhere that they keep track of this.
So they just need to drop in the box.
Right.
The I-94.
Right. It's nothing, there's no big ceremony when you give up your I-94. That's right. Yes, sometimes if you're traveling from Canada or Mexico, which are contiguous to United States, there's a little bit different process. They may not even ask you for your I-94. You can just keep it for leaving up to 30 days sometimes.
On I-94?
Yes. Questions on the I-94? Okay, that's good.
If they don't leave the card, then what will they do?
What?
If they don't give the card, surrender the card back.
If the employee keeps it,
Yeah.
probably nothing will happen. You could even lose it, maybe nothing will happen. But generally, it's advised to keep good track of that form.
Because the record is not maintained when it goes out. It does not give
Right, there may not be a good record of when you left. To make sure that if you leave on time, especially, if you leave before you're supposed to, you want to turn that in, because then there's a record you left on time.
There's actually an address provided where you can send the I-94 cards by post. I think it's in London.
If something happened. So that's a good thing. Other questions? There is a tracking, I'm told. I don't think it's a very good database for them, because people lose these I-94s and things happen. Maybe they don't even get them from the airport sometimes. But generally, I think they do try to keep track. And somewhere I'm told that you can get a printout of the days you were inside the U.S. based on these I-94 issuance and also when they are returned. So I'm told. Now the I-9. What's I-9? That's employer verification. This is a form that you probably will never see. Thank goodness. Okay? If you're in India, you're not seeing this form, I hope. But it's good to know, again, because why would you want to know about this form? Because you're going to hear about it. It's something that you should know as part of what you do. This is important, I think, to know the big picture. After you're all done with your work, preparing the visa paperwork, what happens next? Some of us care, some of us don't. I kind of do that. I like to know. So once the individual comes to the U.S., there's a regulation that says that the employers must inform the government that the employee has proper work authorization. Okay. So that's been required for quite a few years now. Again, if your employee was hired after this date, And most people that you work with were born after this day. So, okay. But anyway, if they're hired after this day, I-94 is required. This is, I think, not necessary here, but people who are rehired or whose status changes and things like this must re-verify their work authorization and provide additional or new documents to the employer showing that they are still valid to work or that there's been a change in status, something has changed. So who's responsible for the I-9? You?
Lawyer.
Me? The lawyer?
The employer.
The employer. The employer is responsible. And so generally, from day one of the employee's work or up to day 3, this form should be filled out. If it's not completed within the 3 days, there needs to be some kind of exception or a good reason. And there's all kinds of rules and regulations around I-9 compliance that we're not going to talk about. But generally, you should know within 3 days that thing's got to be filled out from the time they start. Yeah, what documents qualify for verification? The visa stamp? No. What do you think? What would qualify to show that the person actually had status? The I-94? Or an EAD card or something like that? These are documents that actually indicate work authorization. The visa stamp just says the person has permission to enter the U.S. It doesn't say they really came legally or lawfully or that they have the actual status that is given on the visa stamp. Maybe the immigration officer wrote B1 on that I-94 and they don't really have H-1B status. So all of that can be reconciled at this point when the employee starts working. There's lists on the actual form, which if we go to the next line, I think. Oh, this is kind of interesting. In the United States, there's all this political correctness, right? You can't ask somebody in a job interview if they have family, or which part of the country they come from, because this could all give makes them feel like prejudiced. You know what I mean? In some way. So out of fairness, you're not supposed to ask these kinds of questions. I-9 is also like this. You're not supposed to ask the person really if they're a U.S. citizen or what their work authorization is. You're just supposed to say, show me your work authorization. Show me your documents. Take a pic of this list, and then the employee gives something. The employer is not supposed to ask hey, you look like you don't have work. You just came here, man. Show me your I-94. Hey, I'm a U.S. citizen. Don't talk to me like that, okay? I've been a citizen longer than you just because I look like an Indian over here. You know what I mean? This is why they don't, ask the questions. So they just have to pick off of the list.
In one of the border towns in the U.S., immigration officials, probably 5 or 8 years back, I read in the paper, they arrested a guy who looks Mexican and took him to jail, in the immigration jail. Afterward, they found that he was the mayor of that small town.
It's true.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, there are rules for a reason like this. It's partly to prevent this kind of thing, but it's also just to create a feeling of fairness, that's what we like to have generally everywhere. Okay. So I-9 should be kept for at least 3 years, but also it's kept indefinitely as long as the person is needing additional work authorization. Like if I have an expiration on my I-94, at the time that my I-94 expires, I will have to do a new I-9, a new extension of my visa status or something to show that I'm now current again. So again, keep this document around for at least a year after the employee's said goodbye. Yeah, these are kind of minimal compliance problems. If the employer has several offenses, if they've not complied, you can see that the the penalties become quite large. So generally, they want to do a good job and make sure that they're doing all of this very regularly. This is not an area that I work in a whole lot, but I do help employers stay compliant. And INSZoom has created a software to help employers handle this.